Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. And today a very special guest, Mr. Jim Alfredson. Music always helps us in our success, in our life, and everything we do. We have a great musician. As I said, his name is Jim Alfredson from Lansing, Michigan, known to organ players, jazz organ players, as one of the monsters of the Hammond B3, and he plays other keyboards, very accomplished. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. It's so great to be here.
That old Hammond B3, it's something else, isn't it?
It is quite the instrument, yes.
It really is, and I'll tell everyone up front, also, I play the Hammond B3 and the keyboards, and I found you on YouTube. I would suggest people go and look you up on the YouTube. You have tremendous videos demonstrating your style, and also your website is jimalfredson.com in case they want to follow along. But Jim, tell us about your music that you play and what you're doing right now.
Sure. The Hammond B3 is my instrument of choice, and what we call the box or the beast, because it's a very large instrument. One of those things that's kind of easy to play but hard to master. The style that I play in is based on the style of the great jazz organist Jimmy Smith, who came to prominence in the late 50s and brought the Hammond organ into jazz, and specifically kind of a bluesy, soulful, funky jazz. And so that's kind of my thing. I like the blues. If it doesn't have the blues in it, I'm not interested.
It is excellent. And also, I'll tell people that when many people have heard of the Hammond organ, and I'll also tell them, those that haven't heard it, it has been used in every genre. We're talking about the blues and jazz, but it is used in almost every rock song that has an organ in it. It is a Hammond organ or a Hammond synthesized organ sound. And certainly in the gospel church and all kinds of venues, it's a phenomenal instrument. So I would tell people, when you think of the Hammond organ, it is everywhere, and you have heard it, whether you know that you've heard it or not. Right, Jim?
That's true. When I first met my wife, when we were dating, she didn't know what it was, and then as soon as I pointed out the sound to her and played it for her and pointed that out in music, she heard it everywhere.
It really is a beautiful sound. Well, let's talk about music in general. When did being a musician and getting so involved in music, when did that inspire you? When did you become inspired?
Well, I have my father to thank for that. He was a musician as well. He played guitar, and he played a little bit of Hammond organ. And when I was a kid, he had a big B3 in the living room, and I was just fascinated with it. I remember some of my earliest memories as a child is sitting on the bench pulling out the drawbars of the organ. He had to sell that, unfortunately, when I was a kid. I had 6 siblings, and so he had to sell it to raise some money. We weren't that rich. We were very poor, actually, because he was making a transition from being a musician to a piano tuner. And he wound up doing that for 30 years and raising the kids on that, and it really worked out for him. But it was a transitional period there for a while. That sound was just stuck in my head, and I kind of came back around to it in my teens, and I told my dad, I want to get a Hammond organ. He's like, really? Okay, let's do it. And we found a little M3, which is the little baby model, and that's how I learned to play organ, is on that.
That's very interesting, and that's one of the captivating things as I read your website that you talked about, pulling out the drawbars. I mean, that's a great childhood memory most people don't get to enjoy, but it really has, the B3 has an incredible everything about it, even the way with the oil inside, the way it smells. The genuine Hammond B3 is really something to behold. So also, now, do you play piano and other keyboard instruments? Let's tell people about that.
Yeah, I started on the organ, and then I moved over to synthesizers in my early part of my life, and then into my teenage years. Then I got back into organ, but I also played piano during that time too, because as I said, my father was a piano tuner, and so we had pianos in the house all the time that he was actually repairing and selling. But I definitely consider myself an organist first and foremost. I do love synthesizers. I love the sounds that they can create. I love the experimental nature of them. But the organ is my thing.
And as we think about where you're from and you base your business there in Lansing, Michigan, give us a word. Certainly people hear the show right here in Houston. We call it the fourth largest city, rapidly becoming the third, I am told. Tell us about what's going on in Lansing and from an economy standpoint, just a little bit about the Lansing market, if you would.
Sure. Lansing's a great city to raise a family in. It's the state capital of Michigan, so we have the state government here, and we also have Michigan State University right next door in East Lansing. And then, of course, it was the hometown of Oldsmobile, and GM had a lot of plants here. There's only 2 left now, I think. But it's a good city. It's had its ups and downs like any manufacturing city and blue-collar city. The plus side is that there are a lot of great musicians here, and the musician community here is very tight-knit and very supportive.
Tell us, Jim, about your work as far as your travels go, in case people want to see. I know you play there. It's on the website in Lansing, but give us an idea where else you go when you venture out of Lansing.
Sure. We like to hit the East Coast about once a year. I also tour with a band called Big Apple Blues out of New York, and we go all over the place, Europe, across America. I was touring with a band out of L.A. for 4 years that was doing very long and arduous tours in the U.S. and in the U.S. and Europe. And I had to bow out of that due to family reasons. It just got to be too much. And I do kind of miss that kind of touring, but I also love being home with my kids. I have 3 daughters and my wife, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. So for the most part, I'm kind of sticking local these days, but we do get out to the East Coast. We get to Chicago. We get to Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and stuff.
Well, I want to get a sample of your work out there so people can kind of put this together as they listen to you. You have a project where you're doing some Beatles songs, covering the Beatles songs. That's going to come out pretty soon. And we'll play a little bit of the song called Taxman. Okay. And you could tell us about how you interpreted that and a little bit about it. So let's hear a little bit on the Hammond B3, Jim Alfredson, Taxman. Jim, that is so awesome. Now, people that haven't put together the Hammond and the sound, I think they just kind of put it together right there. That is so great. Tell us about, first of all, why did you choose, the Beatles have great songs, of course. Why did you choose the Beatles songs to cover? And tell us about Taxman.
Sure. Well, the Beatles are, of course, hugely influential, I think, across multiple genres. And they've been covered in the jazz world before, but in the Hammond organ world, there hasn't been too many covers of Beatles songs, and the whole idea kind of manifested itself as we were driving back from, I think, Tupelo, Mississippi. We did a show down there a couple of years ago, and as we were driving back, the 3 of us in the band, we started playing our favorite Beatles songs, from YouTube or whatever on our phones. We decided, we should do our own thing with these tunes. There's so many great songs, so many great melodies that they wrote. We should really do our own thing. And so one of the tunes that I definitely wanted to do was Taxman, because it has that iconic bass line that Paul McCartney played on the Hofner bass, But I didn't want to just do a straight-up cover of it, and so I decided to put it in the time signature of 7/8 instead of 4/4, so it has a kind of a missing beat, which is why it sounds kind of lopsided. And I guess that comes from my background listening to progressive rock and classical music and stuff. And one thing that some of your listeners might not know is that the Hammond organ in jazz, a lot of times the organist is playing the bass lines as well. So you either use your feet on the foot pedals to play the bass, or you use your left hand. And I do a combination of the two. The
thing about the bass, you have now within that song, you have, of course, you're playing the bass on the left hand, and you also have a guitarist and a drummer. That sound we just heard, it's the 3 of you, right?
Exactly. Yep.
A beautiful sound. But tell us a little bit more, because I know a lot of my friends that are involved with the Hammond, including myself. That bass sound you choose, you can have a bass player if you want, but tell us again, what is it about when you play it using the left hand and the combination of your feet to get that bass sound?
Well, when I first heard the organ in jazz, it was a Jimmy Smith record that my dad, laid on me, and I listened to that, and I could not believe that it was three people. And playing with a bass player is great, and I do it quite often in the blues world, especially. But there's something about that drive that comes from the organist playing the bass with the drummer, and if you can lock in with the drummer, the groove is just, I don't know. There's something about it that's so powerful, and of course, as the organ player and the bass player, you can kind of direct the music where you want to go, and as kind of a control freak, I like that.
Well, that's exactly right. There's something about, and the other thing that comes to mind is I certainly can't do it at your level. However, I play around with it, and there's something about there's a push to it that I've experienced that you can't get with that bass player, I guess. However,
Yeah.
On one thought, you'd say, hey, having the bass player, it's less work, so you can concentrate on more things. But it's really a very connected thing, as I observe. But to see you do it, and I encourage, once again, go to see Jim Alfredson on YouTube or anywhere else. You will see how he does it. And I also want to play another thing that you did to demonstrate. It's the song "Come Together." And this one, in this YouTube video, you were playing by yourself. So
Yeah.
I want to also show the beauty of your playing and the Hammond, what it could be, what it could sound like with a master like yourself, just with two hands and your foot. So here comes "Come Together." Here we go. That is so awesome. I mean, that's tremendous.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, and some of the things you're doing, that the stylings that are possible with a Hammond organ, and I can't really describe them, the choppy things and effects that you could do with your two hands. I mean, give us a word because as you're playing, I would imagine so many things come through your mind as far as which style you want to put to it or which riff you want to put to it. Give us a word how the mind's working when you're doing all that, Jim.
Sure. I played in a blues band for 10 years here in Lansing called Root Doctor, and they're still going. They're a great band. They've been around the town forever and very well respected and fun band. And we had a bass player, drums, guitar, myself on keys, and a lead singer. And when the guitar player would solo, he was a great rhythm player, and when he would solo, he was a great soloist as well, but then his rhythm would drop out. And I thought to myself, well, rather than just play a pad or just hold a chord while he's soloing, I should try to emulate a rhythm guitar part underneath him to keep that drive going in the music. And so I kind of developed a style that was based a little bit on Chester Thompson, the great organist with Santana and Tower of Power, where the organ can be extremely rhythmic and, like you said, kind of choppy. And if you play it in that style where you're kind of pressing the keys but not necessarily pressing them all the way, you get this really neat effect, a click or a type of sound, like a choppy type of sound. And it almost sounds like a muted guitar, when you mute the guitar strings and play a rhythm part. And so that's a style that I developed over the course of 10 years with those guys to kind of fill in the gaps when the guitar player would solo.
Well, it's very, very exciting, and I think people are already revved up now for your CD. Let's tell them how they can get the CD with the Beatles songs on it and any other CDs that you have. Let's tell them how they can do that, and when is that going to be released?
Sure. Well, the Beatles CD, which is called actually B3tles,
Love
which is
that.
a play on the words. It's so bad it was something we had to do.
B3tles. Look for it.
B3tles. Yes. Order that right now. Pre-order it, I should say, at pledgemusic.com. Just go there and search for Organissimo. And that's going to be released at the end of February 24th. And the rest of our CDs are available pretty much anywhere you can buy CDs, Amazon.com, CD Baby, all the big online stores have them.
And you say Organissimo. That is the
Yes.
name of the group?
That's the name of the group, yes, Organissimo. So it's kind of like pianissimo, which means very soft. This is Organissimo, which means very organ.
And of course, you have other great CDs as well. What was the one what is your current one before this one comes out?
The last one I did in the jazz vein was called Jim Alfredson's Dirty Fingers. And that was a tribute to the great jazz organist, Big John Patton.
And I believe I saw one of your YouTube videos where you talk about his, and I may have this incorrect, but you talk about his rhythm and his counting. Do I have that right?
Yeah,
There was something
I have a
about the
video where
left
I'm
hand
talking
with
about
that.
his syncopation and his bass lines,
There
because
you
his
go.
bass lines are simple in terms of what he's playing harmonically, but rhythmically he's doing these syncopations that are pretty tricky. So I was trying to show people how to listen for that and how to play that.
And that's a great thing that you do as you share with people that want to play and improve their playing. You do share that, and they could see that on your YouTube videos. Also, well, Jim, let's talk a word about, let's say there's a musician out there, a young person that's thinking about taking up the piano or the organ, or but specifically the keyboard instruments. What would you say as a word of encouragement to those youngsters out there, or even oldsters that want to pick up the piano or keyboards?
Well, sure. When I started playing this instrument, I basically learned from listening to the records, because there was no online resource as there is today. There was no YouTube or anything like that. There was one guy who actually I replaced him in Root Doctor when he left the band, and he was the only guy that I could find in my hometown that played the Hammond organ. And so I went out to see him as much as I could, and we became friends, and he kind of got me started on the path and explained, how the drawbars work and how the pedals work and how you integrate all that. And then I would go and see other Hammond organists as they go through town, like Jimmy Smith, the great jazz organist I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Lonnie Smith, who's still with us, thankfully, and is just amazingly funky, and an individual style that he has is one of my favorites. So I'd go see those guys and talk to those guys too, because they were extremely friendly. So I would inspire people that want to get started on this instrument to go find someone in their hometown that plays it, because the organ organ players are a very close-knit bunch of people, and we love to help and we love to explain what we do. And there's no better way to learn than to sit down with someone and have them, kind of show you the ropes. And then, of course, use the online resources as well. There's so much stuff online now that you can look up and see exactly how something is played. But the biggest thing, and I tell this to my daughter who's 12 and playing the French horn, is that you have to work at it. It's like anything else. Practice makes perfect, and there's no shortcut. You just have to keep working at it and love it and be inspired by it.
And any of your daughters involved on the Hammond organ?
I'm hoping to get the middle one in there. Yeah.
There you go. Now, you mentioned Lonnie Smith. I will tell you this. That's another YouTube video, not to keep bringing the YouTube videos up, but when you played at the music convention here, I guess 2016, where you played the Hammond organ,
yeah,
and Lonnie Smith plays it, I watched both of those videos, and both of what you guys did an incredible job. When he played, I noticed something that I never noticed before. His hands were like spiders on the keys. He plays in a total different way, and it's fascinating to see the different approaches.
It is, and I would. It's funny you mentioned that, because I'd go see the great Joey DiFrancesco, for example.
Oh yeah,
and the way he plays is his economy of motion. The small movements he makes to get big results is really amazing. If you watch his left hand playing the bass line, his left hand barely moves, and yet he's playing these incredible, fast and precise bass lines with that. It's amazing.
And I forget also there was a YouTube of Jimmy Smith playing, and he's always doing incredible things, but he was doing something where he was taking his left hand and going to the high octaves on playing the melody with his left hand high up. I mean, he's just like ambidextrous with the tonalities and it's
Exactly.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, JimAlfredson.com. We've got a few minutes left. Jim, I want to make sure that you get any word out that you would like to tell people. What else would you like people to know about your music or any of your projects or CDs?
Well, sure. I think in deference to the kind of theme of your show overall with success, there's varying degrees of how you measure success. And to me, success is finding that thing that you love to do and pursuing that, and accepting, some of the sacrifices you have to make to do that, but also understanding that when you get to that point where you can actually do it full time. Like it took me a long time to get to the point where I could actually do this full time as a musician and support my family and be home with my family, which is important to me. But when you finally reach that point, it's very, very satisfying. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, and you have to find people that support that as well. My wife is very, very supportive. I try to play with musicians that have positive attitudes and want to push things forward along with me instead of, you have to surround yourself with positive people, I think, and that will lead to success no matter what you do.
You really do. And also those that are not musicians that are out there, the thing about music is it affects everyone's life in a different way, no matter what kind of music we like. It surely has the opportunity to lift us up sometimes or to complement whatever mood we're in, get the blues or whatever it is. Music is just such a tremendous gift here in this life. So, Jim,
I agree.
It's awesome. So give us a quick word, 2017, anything else going on after the Beatles CD, the B3Ls?
B3Ls, yeah. Well, I've got that coming out. I've got a project that the guitarist from Organismo, his name is Larry Barris, and I should mention the drummer, his name's Randy Marsh. We've been playing together for 16 years.
And it looks like it. Yeah, it sounds like it.
The guitarist and I did a project. We recorded it in August with the great drummer Harvey Mason. And Harvey played with Herbie Hancock on the famous Headhunters record.
Wow.
He played with George Benson on Breezin'. He's played with everybody. An incredible drummer. And that project's going to come out probably in the late spring. And then I have another project that's coming actually in a few weeks with a 91-year-old saxophonist that lives here in Lansing. He's never been a professional musician, but he's played all his life. This is his first recording, and it sounds amazing. His tone is incredible. You would not believe that he's 91 years old and he's never recorded before. Well, it's just incredible.
That sounds great. We're going to have you back on that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Jim, for your time and encouragement and inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Alfredson. Go to jimalfredson.com. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Bill. It was so nice to talk to you.
Very nice. And you've been listening to Successful Living. If you don't have any music in your life, get some soon and go to jimalfredson.com. Check out all his work on YouTube and everywhere else. A fantastic individual, great musician. And thank you for listening to Successful Living. We'll see you next week.